So we've gotten to a really great point because at this point we're going to start to actually apply some texture. So I'm going to put down some more colors, specifically the Mars orange here, and I'm also going to put down just a touch of the Sahara yellow. We're not going to quite go into the Iroko yet. It might be too bright, but we may play around with it. So we're going to be playing around with a couple of different concepts. First of all, of course, just texturing and stippling and doing that kind of thing. We want to keep our reference handy right in front of us. But the other thing that I would really like to talk about is I refer to it as the subtractive technique or subtractive method, where you're going to add something. So I'm going to thin some of this down here. And I'm going to place some down, and then with another brush, I'm going to play with it and soak it back up. And this repeated process, you can even spread it around a little bit if you would like, but it just creates a lot of really great noise and a lot of effect to it in a somewhat rapid amount of time. So you can see it there. Just really adds a nice level of effect to it. Now, I don't know if I'm going to use my Winsor & Newton. A lot of times you can pick like old junker brushes. They're really efficient at this, or just maybe a little bit of a lower quality brush. So we've got a couple of good brushes here. We've got this little stubby one. This is one that I cut all the hairs off of. We've got the one that we just had been using. I'm going to give this one a rinse. And then we've got a Winsor & Newton size 0. This is going to be really great for later because we're going to need to do some really fine stippling. And then we've got this Broken Toad size 2 here. This is just great. These are a little bit more affordable, and so and they can take a little bit more abuse than the Winsor & Newtons. So let's go ahead and jump in, and we're just going to start to go around and do this with this African shadow. And now we're going to change up the method as well, depending on where we actually are applying it. And we can even use our finger to lift some of it up. If our finger doesn't work, get the brush. Oops, too much. We're looking for texture and distortion. It can be kind of random right now. When we get into the more specific areas, we're going to use more specific tools. That's why I got out the Winsor & Newton. But for this larger area, we'll save our brushes a little bit, and we'll just use these really brute force, brute force weapons. I really love doing this kind of stuff because it's very free form. There's definitely technique to it. Like there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it. But you can really play with the rules and what works and what doesn't. And I like to let the brush kind of take on a mind of its own. If I feel like if my hand wants to go up a little bit, and I let it. get our more specific tool here. We're going to thin down the African shadow just a touch here. We're going to apply it in a couple of places, but we're going to use this to really help us spread it out in a little bit more of a specific way. You can even just dab some of it here on our thumb and use this to come in. We can even just grab some right from the pile. Okay, then we will just continue. We're going to put those brute force weapons away, and we are just going to continue now with this finer tool. And we can even start to thicken it up just a touch. That one's not working anymore either. The application is just getting smaller and smaller, and so we need to start using a smaller and smaller tool. Alrighty, so hey there everybody. Now I went ahead and worked ahead just a little bit here. As you can see, the bottom is very nice and coarse, and I'm going to walk you through that. I left a whole sleeve and a small section back here. I just wanted to get a handle about how we were going to progress with this, and so I'm going to catch you guys up on a couple, the next couple of steps, and then I'm going to work around it again with the last and final step, and then I will film that final part on these remaining sections for you as well. So we have the Arabian Shadow right here, we have Sahara Yellow right here, and then we have, I think it's then we have Mars Orange right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to mix Mars Orange and the Arabian Shadow to about a 50-50 mix. We want it to be nice, and we want it to be somewhat orange, but we don't want it to be like crazy off the rails and super intense saturated orange. And, you know, you also really need to make sure that you have a secondary brush on hand. We're going to be using our Winsor & Newton for this, and I'm also going to have the Broken Toad size 2. I'm also going to have the Broken Toad size 1 right here on hand and ready to use in case we need to. So I'm going to load up the brush a little bit, and now you know, whenever you're mixing a fresh batch like this, you always want to test it and make sure that it's looking right. And I'm going to apply a little bit, and then I'm going to just play with it around, and it looks like we actually need to thin it just a touch more, just because we want it not drying quite as opaque. And we're going to start to kind of draw on these small lines, and then we're going to kind of come through and create dots as well, just because we want a nice varied surface to create this leather texture. Just try to make sure that your lines are nice and fine. You'll notice as well, like almost whenever I grab some of, or whenever I come back to my scale 75, I almost always grab a little bit of water, and that's mainly because it just dries up really fast even on a wet palette, at least in my area. It might be something you want to consider trying if you've had troubles with scale 75. I noticed that I had this kind of subconscious habit of doing it, and I wanted to share my thoughts on it. It's not every time though. Okay, and that's really about it there. We'll come up, we need to be a little bit more careful and concise up here. we can use our finger and we can use the brush to help us. Now, one of the goals up here as well is to just discolor the area, but we need to be more careful with our lines. They need to be even finer. It's okay as well if you shift down even in brush size and use like a 00 or even a 000 here. The Winsor & Newton is nice and fine, so I can get away with, using it, but you just still want to be very, very careful. So here we're going to be just going kind of we're going to be going kind of perpendicular and creating these like little squiggling lines that might run through it. And you guys can kind of see it here on this one, how it can branch all the way across. And now we're doing that just because it potentially might be the way that it cracks. It visually just looks very nice. And it's going to crinkle, it's going to split apart because there's so much weight on it. It's been curled back and there's a lot of extra elements of force. It's right next to his hand and his arm, and so it's getting brushed up against quite a bit, whenever he reaches and grabs for something. Just all things to be thinking about. It's starting to kind of show the way that I want it to. And I'm feeling very, very happy with that.